Good morning, everyone. My name is Lila Ibrahim. I'm a member of the Committee on Shared Ministry at the First Unitarian Church of Oakland. We are so glad to have you here with us this morning. We're committed to being a community where everyone is welcome and differences are celebrated. You, our children, youth, adults, are welcome here. If you're new, I invite you to fill out a Newcomer Connect card online. You can use the QR code they should be in the seats, or you can go to a link on our website to do that. You can also go to one of the greeters in the foyer or at the welcome table in Venti Hall after the service, and you can leave us your contact information. Doing this helps you to explore what our community has to offer and find ways that you can participate and learn about future services. And if you want to learn more about the church, Emily Stoper will come down here after the service and will tell you more about our congregation and how you can be involved and get connected. Welcome, everybody. And now let's turn our attention to our land acknowledgement. At this moment, we remember that the land we're standing on, that this building, is on land that used to belong to the Ohlone people. Basically, the land was stolen from them long before any of us was ever born. We understand this and try to take a little bit of responsibility for repairing that harm, which we didn't do, but we're here right now, so we benefit from it. One of the ways we do this is we promote the Shumi land tax so that the Ohlone people who are buying back some of their land that we're contributing to the Ohlone people's buying back some of their land. And that's one of the ways our congregation and many of us as individuals work to repair that particular harm.
Good morning. I would like to introduce a new worship associate. This is his debut today. This is Henri. Henri is still relatively new to this community, but boy, has he jumped in. He went to the Faithful Fools Coming of Age weekend a few weekends ago with some of our youth. He also is in the sermon writing class that I've been doing. I was impressed that when I gave him a copy of Sherry Prudhomme's Gather the Spirit, which is the history of this congregation, Henri read it from back to front, and he came up with what he called Project 155, 155 representing the years between 1869, when this congregation was founded, and today. So anyway, this is Henri. And one of the things I want to say is that when we're going to light the candles before we do the call to worship. And when we light the Black Lives Matter candle, let's keep in mind that February is Black History Month. And whatever the administration or someone else thinks about it, we still would like to lift up the accomplishments of the Black Americans, that in 1926, Black History Month was first conceived, and it is still alive and well. And I believe that there is a display in Venti Hall that Sarah brought that has Black History Month memorabilia. And so you want to maybe take a look at that in Venti Hall. So Henri, I'll turn it over to you.
Peace is present right here and now, in ourselves and everything we do and see. Every breath we take, every step we take can be filled with peace and joy. Together we say, peace is possible. How do you go about loving your enemies? I think the first thing is this: in order to love your enemies, you must begin by analyzing self. Together we say, Black Lives Matter. We light this chalice symbol of Unitarian Universalism. May it remind us of the divine spark in all of creation, of the power of love to heal what is broken and to be grateful for life's blessings each day. We bid you welcome, who come with hope in your heart, who come with anticipation in your step, who are seekers of a new faith, who come to probe and explore you who are enriches us all. To belong is to be longing for a space to be held. In one voice, come, let us worship together.
And now would you please rise in body and spirit, and we'll sing our gathering song, Enter Rejoice and Come In.
Good morning. I am going to invite the children of all ages to come on up. I've got a story to share called Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. And you're going to want to see the pictures. So go ahead and sit up on there. Yeah? You can come on up. Both of you can come on up. So, Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. Over the lake and out past the bay was a green grassy hill where the rocks came to play. They would race to the top to take in the view, then roll their way down the way rocks love to do. There was Kip, Pip, and Chester, and Marvin the Boulder. Ignatius played too, though he was much older. And the group called the Pebbles never ever sat still, zigzagging their way up and over the hill. Kai was a meteorite and not from this planet, and Maya was lava, but taken for granite. Stu was the smart one, Parker the clown, and grumpy old Ebert rolled round with a frown. Gabby was sassy, Leslie had flair, Emma was giggly, and Hud had black hair. But then, the one trait that seemed to be shared by them all was that every rock there was shaped like a ball, and because they were round, they could easily roll through the grass, past the lake, and up over the knoll. Except for poor Ricky, who quietly sat. You see, Ricky couldn't roll because one side was flat. But his friends didn't get it. "Come roll," they would chant. So Ricky tried, but replied, "I'm sorry, I can't." But the rocks were determined. They were sure they could solve Ricky's flat-sided problem and help him revolve. So Marvin the boulder, with his impressive physique, carried Rick up all the way to the hill's grassy peak. Then they pushed him down, yelling, "Keep rolling, kid." But Ricky didn't roll. He just kind of slid. And his bubble says, "This feels like a bad idea." Well, they pushed and they pulled, they trying every which way to get Ricky to roll, but by the end of the day, nothing had worked, just like Rick expected, and he ended up feeling depressed and dejected. "It's no use," Ricky sighed, "there's just isn't a way, so I'll sit off to the side and watch you all play." But his friends wouldn't quit. "We're here for you, brother. We'll get you to roll one way or another." So they pondered and thought, each straining their brain, till they looked up and saw it was starting to rain. At that moment, it hit. The smart stone named Stu. "Eureka!" he shouted. "I know just what to do." He explained to them how they would get Ricky to roll. "My plan is pure genius." Stu wasn't too humble. So they carried our hero down the road about a mile to the lake where they gathered up mud they could pile. On the flat side of Rick, creating a mound that they shaped smooth and sculpted until it was round. Then after the rain, the sun in the sky, they left him to bake till the mud was all dry. They gathered up vines and one colorful feather, and they wrapped all round Rick to keep it together. When the last knot was tied and the work was all done, the only step left was for Rick to have fun. They stood back and watched, feeling nervous and tense, and Rick breathed in deep with increasing suspense. He moved slowly at first, testing his new mold, and then, for the first time, Ricky the rock rolled. So Bria, the ladybug who'd been there from the start, felt a surge of pure joy well up in her heart. She thought as she watched her friends play on the hill that there's always a way if there's also a will. And she said to herself as Ricky rolled down the slope, when you're surrounded by love, you always have hope. Thanks for coming up, kids. Now we're going to sing the children out. And I know a new song.
It is by Melody DeMore. Some of you know it. It goes, "You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other.
One foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And lead with love. And lead with love. For our greeting today, I'll read the words that were included in the call to worship. Who you are enriches us all. To belong is to be longing for a space to be held. So today, for our invitation to greetings, what I'd like you to do is take a moment and think to yourself, where is it that you feel held? Think of a place where you belong. And then after you think about it, turn to a neighbor and share with them. And then when you start hearing the music that Vince is going to start playing for our next song, then you can rise in body or spirit and we'll sing, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. So go ahead. Where do you belong? Where do you feel held?
So do we not go? Technical question, do you normally take it with you, or does it stay there?
I put it there so that Lila had it, and I'll take it as I see it. I think that's what is after the song, right? Yep.
Does it take us notice to adjust the
Please rise in body or spirit.
In October, I began a small spiritual practice when I saw someone walking on the street towards me. I asked two questions. How am I like this person? Or how is this person like me? I remember my first encounter was just outside of Oakland School of the Arts. It was a high school student, a girl. She was talking on her cell phone. She seemed angry, and she had many tattoos. That is what I recall. Okay. So for me, It wasn't tattoos, maybe it was my shoulder-length hair in college. And I wonder about that cell phone, whether I would have been less angry had I had one, or she had she not had one. This practice has made me a bit more inclusive. There are people around me that I was excluding, that I was not noticing, and now I am noticing them. Being inclusive is big business these days. Lots of churches want to tell you that they are inclusive, that they are welcoming. I decided to check that statement out by looking at the websites of 5 churches within a mile or 2 of here. Here's what I found. Here's one. We are on a journey toward becoming the beloved community. We welcome and affirm persons of every age, national origin, racial and ethnic heritage, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, physical ability, and spiritual leaning. With the next one, I can see that Christianity is a bit on the defensive. Many wars have been fought in the name of Jesus Christ. We are committed to ending violence done in Jesus' name. We do not believe or insist that Jesus is the only way to God. We welcome and accept beliefs that do not fit into a neat category or description. And another church that is reaching out to non-Christians. We desire to talk to skeptics, not about them. You are welcome here. Come, doubt, ask, explore. Your presence would be a gift to us. The next one, I recognize the words, but I don't have an image of how they would actually apply. We lay claim to the biblical imperatives of welcoming the marginalized, giving voice to the oppressed, honoring all people, and finally a more folksy welcome. Whether you are from the Bay or new to the area, we have designed our church with you in mind. This is a place where you can belong. You can expect to feel welcome. Inclusion seems to be connected to diversity. If a church is inclusive, and if it is successful in its inclusion by how it welcomes people, then over time, the newcomers would tend to stay and the church would become more diverse. At least that's what I used to think. But there was one odd outlier in my survey of nearby websites, the Roman Catholic Cathedral of Oakland. I can find not a shred of a word of inclusion on their website. And yet, they appear to be amazingly the most diverse of all the churches that I'm referring to. They look like Oakland, and they're large. The congregation is, for me, astoundingly large. I have no idea how they do that. In my passerby practice, I noticed that most of the people that I'm passing by are younger than me. I have no idea how that happened. But that got me to thinking about how I include or not young adults in my life. To respect younger adults, I think one part of that would be to understand how their thinking is different than mine. And to look into that, I returned to something called the Mindset Project. I'm curious if anyone has bumped into that. Yeah, it's interesting. So it was started by a group of Midwestern college professors. The idea was to describe the outlook, the mindset of each entering freshman class, so that a professor in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s might have some clue about who they were teaching, so that they might know that the people they're teaching don't have the same beliefs, don't begin with the same beliefs as they do, or that they might have some inkling that maybe they don't own all of the wisdom. I quote from that website. They, the entering class of 2024, they are keenly aware of climate crisis and increasingly questioning of science in our national dialogue. The second part of that threw me for a loop. They are beginning to explore race relations beyond Black Lives Matter toward a deeper understanding of whiteness. I have no idea what that's about, but I am curious. World politics has always been post 9/11. The US military has always been involved in Afghanistan. There was a small gasp just now. When I mentioned this to an older friend, they responded, "I'm still trying to process the Vietnam War." It makes sense that I don't understand this. This is the emergent thought of a new generation. This is the newness, and I am more comfortable with the oldness. I am not a generation behind. I'm at least 2. But I think the Mindset Project is onto something. In my few months here, I've bumped into 16 people new to the church, newcomers. And it's true, the more I listen to them, the more I find myself open to a new mindset, a new way of thinking. But I don't want to confuse my terms. Just because someone is new doesn't necessarily mean that they are a young adult. But it does. Of the 16 that I've met, 15 have clearly been under 45. And they've all appeared without children and more or less single. So that's who is coming to us. Last year I received another clue about how young adults might be thinking differently than me. I was in a project at the cathedral called the Rescue Project. It was a prayer and study group of about 60 people. And it's the demographics, it had a wide range, but the median was early 30s. And everything seemed fine until we sang. When we sang, something about the words were like a different theology than I'm used to. Something about the musical style. I said, well, that is not of my generation. And it got me to thinking, what would our singing, what would our liturgy, what would our programming be like if this church were majority young adults? We can't answer that question, we don't know the answer, but it's quite possible to pose the question and ponder it. And I think it's useful. I think it would be respectful. It would be part of our practice of compassion, part of our practice of inclusion. Oakland, California, Wednesday night, the YMCA, 3rd floor, the weight room. There are about 50 people on the whole weight room floor, and every one of them is happily south of 40 years old, except the guy who took the photo. From my Waldorf training, the word, I think, is hygienic. It would be hygienic if each of us, within our daily, weekly routines, were to find ourselves to be the diversity in the room, rather than to be more comfortable, to bring our good intentions, and hope that somebody else will come and be the diversity in the room. Half an hour after these photos, an older man wandered in, and he struck up a conversation with me. None of the other 49 has ever struck up a conversation with me. But I do not begrudge that. Watching their form, it's clear that being here and doing the weightlifting there is much more of a spiritual practice for them than a social hour. And the photos don't show a community, they just show a bunch of people. I'd like to end with the inclusion statement of one more local church. Congregational vision to build a radically inclusive community, to grow the beloved community by expanding the welcome table and deepening our commitments to countering oppression as an intentional, multiracial, multicultural, multi-generational congregation. Amen. When I look at the other statements that I read to you, this one is the strongest. This one is the one that seems to promise the most. This one is written by a true community, unlike the weightlifters at the Y. I was not here in 2005 when some of you wrote that, but it is the statement of a true community. My own statement of inclusion might be less uplifting. It might simply be what I am willing to do. A few months ago, I decided that I was willing to sit in the part of the church that the newcomers tend to sit in and see what happens. Last month, as I was preparing, I decided that I was willing to speak to you openly about this issue and see what happens. If we were to each look at what we are willing to do and sum that up, that might be another way of saying, this is our inclusion. When I walk home today, after service, after social hour, after our listening, I'll finally walk home, and I will resume my passerby practice. It's now pretty much a habit. And I encourage you to reflect on your practice, either of being a young adult or of including young adults, either in your own lives or the life of this church.
Let's sing again. So please rise and bow your spirit and join in singing. Today's embracing meditation will include the tradition of this congregation to fill the sanctuary with the sound of voices speaking out loud your joys and your sorrows. But I would also like to introduce a practice that many UU congregations will use for their joys and sorrows, which is to have a book that will be in the narthex each Sunday, and you're invited to write something down about your joy or your sorrow, who you'd like to memorialize or remember or celebrate. And then I'll read them, as well as whatever people put in the chat. Let's turn around and say hi to the people on Zoom. We know you're with us. And then after I read them, we'll go ahead and I'll ring the bell and you can speak out loud as we have traditionally done. So written in the book today, there is a request for prayers in the health and well-being of Timon O'Connor. May he find his way. And prayers for my sister Lisa, who recently had double mastectomy and needs knee surgeries. That was by Carol Lane. And then Janelle Moon signed her name, and now we have a Gmail, and so we will be in touch. And in our chat, sorry. There's a thank you, Marianne, and my greetings to everyone from Judith Hunt, one of our most faithful Zoomers. And now I will ring the bell, and please take a moment to tune into your heart. Some of you may not want to speak out loud, but go ahead and make this prayer rising up into the sacred space of this sanctuary, and imagine yourself being held in the embrace of this community.
Linda Clark and Zoya. Yolanda Sanchez, Lee Buckley, and hundreds of thousands of civil servants.
Darren Rodino, Will West,
Linda Copeland.
Maxine Hughes,
Kathy Cade. Judy Freespirit. Carol Bailey. Rebecca Solomon, Heather Parks, our children.
And I think this sanctuary is still filled with the energy yesterday of the celebration of life for Kathy Cade. For all that has been spoken, and of course all the thoughts and feelings that are held in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, please join me in saying, we hold them in our care. Did you know that if you place 2 living heart cells from different people into a petri dish, they will in time find and maintain a third common rhythm? So during our moment of silence, for those of you in the sanctuary, I want you to pay attention to your heartbeat. For those of you on Zoom, pay attention to your heartbeat. And I wonder how long it would take for our hearts to find that third common beat. As a musical response who are embracing meditation, let's just do one verse of Comfort Me. Go ahead and begin to sing. Inclusion these days is really kind of a loaded topic. We have an administration that was elected to lead this country that seems to be bent on exclusion. Excluding immigrants, excluding trans people, excluding aid. It's just staggering. And let me say that last week, when some UU clergy got together, one of my colleagues, Dave Clements, who's been serving as an interim in Santa Rosa, said that from the pulpit, he was feeling so much anger and so much frustration and so much confusion and despair. And so you know what he did, which I'm going to ask you to do? He said that he invited people to roar and scream with him. And so I'm going to invite you to do that. So take a moment to tune in to the things that frustrate and anger you, and let us, what?
Can we stand up?
Stand up if you have, if you want to, or rise in your spirit, and let us roar! Okay, thank you. And you know what was interesting is that when we clergy were talking about now, what are we supposed to do? Because that's in all of our hearts and minds, and for those of us who are in a position of leadership, of spiritual leadership, it's a heavy burden. We want to keep hope alive in your heart, but we also want to be firmly rooted in the reality of what today is. So one of the things is that people were saying we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What we need is to ally with existing interfaith groups, which we're going to do this next Thursday. There's an action that a bunch of us are going to go to. But here was what was so fascinating, and what I want you to know, is there was actually a consensus among the clergy that our job is to focus on you and to enrich our sense of community, that we are not alone in this time, and to do things to cultivate spiritual nourishment, to keep hope alive, and to cultivate resilience. And so today I want to just briefly talk about what it means to belong in this congregation. And actually, I want to tell you a quick vignette of the congregation I served in Colorado. One of my finest moments, I'll say, is that it was a very young congregation that had met in 7 places in the first 10 years. When I came, it was 10 years old. And after a few years, we had a capital campaign, and we raised enough money to buy a building. And we had so many town halls and listening to each other, and what I knew is that it was not a consensus. The building that I was hoping we would buy, some people thought was too small because we were growing. Some people thought we should be downtown instead of in a more residential area. But every single person in the congregation got to express what their feelings were. Then when there was the meeting, there were 2 microphones, pro and con. Again, everyone had a chance to voice what their concerns and their opinions were. And then there was a vote. And ultimately the vote was in favor of buying the building. And what I was paying attention to are the people who I knew were opposed to that. And this is what made me so pleased. None of them left. Every single person who had opposed the building stayed, and many of them became lay leaders. And I loved the fact that even though they didn't get their way, they were loyal enough and felt that this was their congregation, and so that they stayed. So there is a book that I really like. I gotta go get it. It's called Belonging, the Meaning of Membership. And I'd like to read you something. You may have heard it before, but it's by G. Peter Fleck. And he wrote a book called The Blessings of Imperfection. He said, well, let's be frank and admit that the church has its aggravations. The eternal and oh so necessary concern about finances. The annually recurring problems of balancing a budget, of finding money for replacing the roof, repairing the boiler and tuning the piano, the ongoing criticisms of the minister's sermons, which are too liberal for some and too orthodox for others, too pedantic for some and too colloquial for others. The endless committee meetings about the Sunday school curriculum and about the propriety of social action, the persistent shortage of tenors in the choir. Who wants it? Who needs it? Right?
Right on.
Well, the answer, he writes, is that we want it because we need it. The answer is that the church, and now I'm speaking of the liberal church, in spite of its shortcomings, the imperfection that characterizes everything made by humans is better, infinitely better, than no church. Maybe I should not have said in spite of its shortcomings, but because of its shortcomings. For isn't it true that in our churches, in these communities of the Spirit, we have more resources than outside of our churches to accept each other's imperfections, to reconcile our differences, to forgive and be forgiven, to comfort and be comforted, to love and to be loved. Isn't that what church is all about? Because it is what life is all about. And so let me say that at some point you are going to be disillusioned. You might be angry at the way some decision is made or something didn't go your way. But I am hoping that when you are on the brink of perhaps leaving and saying, forget it, I thought this place would be different, that instead you may reconsider and you may decide to stay at the table and to continue doing the work of the church, which is to forgive ourselves and each other and to begin again and again and again in love. So, you know, one of the ways I think that we can build strength in our community is through the Listening Project. Listening to one another is one of the ways that we have connections. And so I'm encouraging those of you who are here today in person. We're going to have a sign-up sheet in the Star King room if you're willing to be listened to. And then we're going to also have people sign up if they can't stay today, but would like someone to reach out to them and to arrange to go to a coffee shop or to someone's home or maybe take a walk in the park. Well, to demystify this, I'm going to invite up here and give you each microphones Janet and Tyler. Janet is going to be the listener, the trained listener, very high tech, right? And then Tyler is going to be the one who's listened to. So here you go.
Well, Laura, we didn't tell you, but we actually decided to change that up. He's going to be the listener, and I'm going to be the listening. Okay.
Oh, yes. in case any of you that don't know me, my name is Tyler. I'm kind of new to the church, maybe about a year ago, and I am involved in the young adults group here. When we say young adult, we mean people in their 20s and 30s. So if you're interested in that, please talk to me after the service, and I would be happy to tell you about it.
So Tyler, I met you sometime in the last year, and you've been up front and spoken about yourself. Just 2 weeks ago, you talked about your wild and precious life. Some of you were here probably and saw that. And then we were at the Listening Project training together.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure. I'm sorry, am I supposed to
The first question is, are you okay with talking about this in front of 80 people?
Right, yes, so thank you so much for being here with me. Is that okay with you? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I get really excited in church, and I need to remember to be grounded, to be in touch with my inner self, my integrity and who I am, and to be willing to be vulnerable in front of people who I might know for 25 years and others who I don't know at all.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to that, and it's very brave. I'd like to hear a bit about why you decided to be involved in the Listening Circle in the first place.
Well, I started thinking about this, and it's because I want deeper connections. I want deeper connections with people. I want deeper conversations with the people I talk to. And this seemed like a way to get it.
Yeah. Well, in what ways has it given you what you wanted, and maybe in what ways has it not yet? This experience.
Well, we were invited to make an appointment with somebody in the room at the training, and I made appointments with 3 people, all 3 of whom said, I wanted to talk to you too. Wow. Was that ever exciting? And one of them was Tyler, and we got together Saturday a week ago and did 45 minutes, sat together and took turns. And it was beyond my wildest imagination, really. I mean, you're fun to talk to and easy to talk to, which is helpful, I gotta say. He asked me one question, I talked for 20 minutes. It was easy on him, right? But by the end of our conversation, we had each kind of unveiled something about ourselves that was very vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna make an appointment to have another conversation so we can keep deepening our relationship. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really been a pleasure on my end too, and I really appreciate getting to know you better. Let's see, we probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions up here. How do you find asking someone questions? How do you find the process of coming up with a question? Is that hard for you? Do you find it comes easily?
It really does depend on the person and how easy they are with conversation. But I find I'm just so curious. I want to know. And you offered a tag, an entry by your share with the generational, what am I doing with my wild and precious life, where you said you were committed to freedom. So that was what I started with, was you said you were interested in freedom, personal freedom, and helping other people be free. I want to know all about that. And I'm sure there's more.
Yeah. How about the experience of being asked a really personal question and having to answer it and think about something hard like that? How do you find that?
It feeds me in a very deep place in my soul to feel that somebody wants to know who I actually am. And sometimes I'm discovering that and unfolding that as I'm talking. And sometimes it's something that I've floated in conversation with other people, but they were not ready to pick up on it. And actually, we had one of those moments for me in our conversation, and you said, well, next time I'd like to hear more about that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, somebody who is actually willing to hear me on this difficult issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always going to be more to talk about together, right? More to learn about each other, and I find that to be one of my favorite parts about this, is just finding how deep just every single person is, right? How incredible all their stories are. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And do you see this beautiful tree here? This is going to be like, you know how with pledge drives there might be a temperature where you are trying to make the money go up? Well, we're going to put fruit on this tree. And for every conversation, we're going to put a cherry or a banana or an orange or an apple. And so what we're hoping is that by April, which is when we're going to end this campaign, we're going to have an amazing service with a flower communion, an ingathering of new members, and a celebration of the end of our listening campaign. By then, this tree is going to be groaning with different types of fruit. So our goal is at least 100 people in 100 days, and we're hoping that we'll go way above 100. So are you interested in this? Yeah? Really, I think it's going to make a big difference, and I think the timing of it is really, really good, because this congregation is rebuilding in so many ways, and there is nothing more valuable than relationships. So, what's next? I think we have an offertory, so I'll turn it back over to Henri.
In the past 12 months, First Unitarian has welcomed 12 new members. Please give to support these new members, those new and coming to us for the first time, those who have spent decades of their lives at our church, and everyone in between. For the months of January, February, and March, we will be splitting our plate with the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity. This is an important local nonprofit that shares our values, so please give generously. Will the ushers please come forward?
Please join me. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we welcome in community, we dedicate ourselves and these our
This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the world, the whole world, in our hands.
Let's see. Okay. I did want to make 2 more announcements before my benediction. One is that Emily Stoper, who's going to meet people who are new up here after church, will also be offering the popular 5-session course covering the history of Unitarianism, Universalism, and Unitarian Universalism. They joined in 1961. And it will be on Zoom on Thursday evenings starting on February 27th. There's no required meeting, but there is a cap of 12 people, so if you're interested, see Emily after the service. The second thing is, as I mentioned, there is an action on Thursday morning in San Francisco, and we are having a contingent of UU from the Oakland Church, including me. I will be wearing my clergy garb, and we'll meet at 11 at St. Mark's in San Francisco, march through Japantown, and then there will be a vigil commemorating, I think it's the 83rd. Yeah, but anyway, it's going to be amazing. So I hope that many of you will join us, and if you want more information on it, I think there's going to be the action pod in Venti Hall. So I'm hoping there is going to be a stampede to the Star King Room to sign up for listening. And for our benediction, I want to offer the words that I included in my minister's musings this last week. It was part of Reverend Kevin Mann's service last Sunday. In a time of hate, love is an act of resistance. In a time of fear, faith is an act of resistance. In a time of poor leadership, community is an act of resistance. And in a time like this, joy is an act of resistance. So go forth in this beautiful day, and I hope to see many of you paired up. You know what, when we did the training and we did a little mini listening like Tyler and Janet just did, we practically had to drag people back into Star King. They were having so much fun. So if you have trepidation, if you can, just let it go, make a leap of faith, and I think you won't regret it. Okay, so I'm going to go out that door, then you can go into the Star King Room in Venti Hall for a coffee hour.